Kiddushin Daf Yomi Men are from Mars, Isha, בעלה, משמחה. We of course know, and we've spoken many times already in the Matmonim, about some of the inherent differences between men and women, or more particularly between the male energy and the female energy. And we've often said there are men who have larger or smaller amounts of female energy. We all have some. And there are women who have larger or smaller amounts of male energy. So we're not always talking about men and women, although generally men excel in male energy and women in female energy. And men, using their male energy, are able to control their emotions in the sense of being able to turn them off or turn them on almost at will, and sometimes unintentionally they just turn off. Whereas a woman is much more instinctually emotion, and in this difference lies both the strength and the weakness of each. But when they come together in partnership, that difference between man and woman, that complementary difference between man and woman, creates a perfect harmony. Our Gemara is looking at the question of whether an Isha, a woman, is chayevet b'simcha, whether the shiur that we have in Parshas Re'eh of v'samachta b'chagecha, that you have to be happy on Yom Tov, does that apply to a woman as well? And Abaya says there, when it says v'samachta, it doesn't mean every single person has to be happy. It means men have to be happy, and women, בעלה משמחה. In the case of a woman, it's the man who has to be mesamech the woman, to make her happy, to facilitate her happiness. And Rashi says, Ein chovat hasimcha tluya ba. In the case of a woman, her obligation for simcha, for joy in Yom Tov, is not dependent on her. Ela al ba'ala, she is samchena, kari be v'simachta. So we understand when it comes to the woman that this word v'samachta could also be read as v'simachta. V'samachta means you shall be happy. V'simachta means you shall make others happy. And we have to do both on Yom Tov. And in particularly the case of the husband, he's required to be happy himself, and for that happiness to overflow and to project and to radiate outwards to those who are about him, particularly to his wife, and to be mesamech his wife. And here we see this understanding. We're only given mitzvot that we have bechira over. We're only given mitzvot that we can choose. So if a man is told v'samachta, you must be happy, that means a man is capable of becoming happy. A man is capable of deciding. It's a choice. I'm choosing to be happy at this particular moment. And we've had before the Rambam's comment in Hilchos Ishus that a man is not allowed to be atzev, is not allowed to be depressed in his relationship with his wife. And we see that he has control over that. A man, obviously we're excluding situations of clinical illness where a person is clinically depressed. But apart from that, a man has the capacity to say, I choose to be happy. A woman, not so easily. A woman is affected by her environment. She's affected by the things that are around her, and her state of happiness is a reaction. It is a response to what's happening about her. And if her husband is mesameach her, she is happy, and he has got that responsibility to be mesameach her. And in what ways? The Gemara says in Psochim, even in matters of clothing, to make sure that on Yom Tov she feels that she looks good. The kavod bat melech pnima, a woman's honor is inwards, which means her outer manifestation needs to be something that gives her a sense of presence, because she doesn't reveal her inner being. A man is more able to reveal his inner being, so the way he's dressed is not that important. He's out there. People know who he is. They feel his personality. But a woman keeps her personality to herself more. There's more privacy, more inwardness, more interiority in a woman. And so she depends on her clothes to create some kind of a sense of presence. And he needs to make sure that she has the clothes that she needs to feel confident and to feel okay and to feel happy on Yom Tov. That's part of his obligation when it comes to Yom Tov. The difficulty is this Gemara, Abaya's statement here, seems to fly in the face somewhat of the Gemara in Chagiga, and elsewhere Gemara in Rosh Hashanah as well. In Chagiga, the Gemara talks about a young child having to come to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, for the mitzvah of Re'iyah, of being seen over Yom Tov. The Gemara says, who brings the child to Yerushalayim? Once the child's in Yerushalayim, the father, if it's a child that's old enough to hold his father's hands, the father can take him to the Beis HaMikdash. But how did the child get to Yerushalayim? Abaya answers, the woman, his mother has to come to Yerushalayim too. She's also obligated b'simcha. And so the mother brings him to Yerushalayim. And that makes it very difficult, because as Rashi says, a woman has to go to Yerushalayim for Yom Tov, and she has to be happy with her husband on Yom Tov. That seems to go against what Abaye is saying. Over here in our Gemara, both Gemaras are Abaya. Our Gemara says that Abaya says a woman is not chayevet b'simcha. She doesn't have to demonstrate your happiness to be happy. Her husband needs to facilitate her happiness. Whereas in Gemara Chagiga, Abaya says very clearly that she is the child's mother is chayevet to have simcha. The Baal HaMor in Rosh Hashanah Daf Vov Amud Beis, or in the Rif pages, it's on Daf Aleph Amud Aleph, and we brought this Baal HaMor before. We brought it in Chagiga Daf Vav, where the Baal HaMor says that you've got to say a woman doesn't have the obligation to be happy. He has an obligation to facilitate her happiness, but she has an additional obligation, that is to be there for his happiness, to be there for him, because he can't be fully happy without his wife's participation. So it's almost a din in ishut, it's almost part of her responsibility as a wife, rather than as a chiyuv in simchat Yom Tov. It's not that she has to be happy for Yom Tov, she has to respond to his facilitating of her happiness, but she has an additional thing. He has to be happy on Yom Tov, and how can he be happy on Yom Tov if she's not there with him? So to facilitate her happiness, she has to be there too. There's a beautiful piece of Torah Tamima in the Pasuk in Parshas Re'eh, where the Torah Tamima says, on this Baal HaMor, he brings the idea that the Ran brings in Masechta Kiddushin, that even though a woman is not obligated with the mitzvah of Pru Revud, she doesn't have the mitzvah of having children. He has the mitzvah to have children. Nevertheless, in the case of the woman, yesh la mitzvah shemesayat lebala lekayim mitzvato. He's got to have children, and for that he needs her. And she has a mitzvah to participate with the husband, to facilitate it, to enable it. And that's part of that feminine role. There are some things that a woman takes the lead in. There are some things that a woman is chayevet in her own right. She has to do herself, and she has to eat matzah on Pesach night. That's something that she has to do, and she has to keep Shabbos. There are lots and lots of mitzvahs that a woman has to do. But there are some mitzvahs that she doesn't have to do in her own right, but she does need to facilitate her husband's capacity, because that's what a woman does. She creates the conditions for a man to shine. In addition to her own thing, that doesn't mean that she doesn't have a life of her own. A woman has two roles. She has her own life, and she has a life which is dedicated to the mission of her husband. And that's what happened at the chuppah when he said, Harei at mekudeshet li, are you willing to become dedicated to my development and growth? Because if I am developing and growth, and you are dedicated to helping me and facilitating that to happen, I can invest all of that in our family. I can invest that in you, and I can in turn facilitate your growth. But we need to have a very clear commitment that that's what's going to happen, that the man is going to be committed to growth, that your life as a woman, of course you have your own independent life, and of course you might excel in your own professional areas, but that's you as an individual. You as the wife has a role to facilitate the well-being of the family, and in this case particularly the husband. So when it comes to Pru Revu, I have to have children. Are you happy to make that possible? Are you happy to dedicate yourself to having my children and raising my children with me, because I can't do this without you? The Torah Tamima says in the name of the Sefer Acharedim that the same applies when it comes to Birkat Kohanim. The Kohanim have to bless the people. There's a mitzvah that the Kohanim have to bless the community. There's no mitzvah that the community has to listen to the Kohen. There's no mitzvah that you have to go to shul and listen to the Kohen giving Birkas Kohanim. But we do that. Do we go and listen to the Birkat Kohanim, to the Kohanim giving us their blessing just so as to get the blessing, or is there some mitzvah involved? Says the Sefer Acharedim, there is a mitzvah, because by going to be present, we are facilitating that. יש להם מצווה בשמיעתם שעל ידי זה הם מסייעים לכהנים לקיים מצוותה כתיקונה. Because by being present, we're creating the condition for the Kohen to be able to give his bracha. And that's how we participate. It's not our bracha, we don't have to give it, it's not our mitzvah. But the Kohen can't do that mitzvah without us, he needs the community there. And the more people that are there to receive the bracha, the more love and the more passion the Kohen invests in the bracha, and our presence assists that. We can create the conditions in which other people want to give of themselves. They want to be generous. This is an important element in the management of people in a business. We want the people who work for us to be willing to give of themselves, to give more than just the minimum requirements of their job. But to do that, we have to create the conditions in which they want to be generous. They want to be able to give. And so it is in a marriage. In the case that we're talking about, particularly when it's talking about simcha, the man has to be happy. That's his responsibility. Furthermore, he has to facilitate the happiness of his wife and family. But the wife has a role too, even though she doesn't have a direct mitzvah to be happy or to make somebody else happy. She does have a mitzvah to be there with her husband in Yerushalayim, having the meals together, so that she can create the conditions for his happiness, and his happiness in turn can overflow to the family.